All right, welcome everybody to another author chat on SPFBO, and I'm super, super excited to be chatting today with Krystle Matar. She is the author of the Tainted Dominion series, including her debut novel, Legacy of the Brightwash, which I have right here. Yeah,
Yes,
this chunky
it's
boy.
very chunky.
And it's
So
also a
handsome.
finalist for the so handsome, a finalist for the seventh self-published fantasy blog off. And she's also a parent and a farmer with a lot of children, even more animals, and an excellent husband. And on top of that, she's a lover of whiskey, one of the most positive contributors that I know of to the self-published author community on Twitter, and someone I consider a dear friend, which is probably why this interview is going to be a bit of a shit show and more off the rails than usual. But
You're
hello,
making me blush
Krystle.
already.
Welcome
That's
to the
not
show.
fair. Thank you for having me on.
I got my glass of port here, so we can cheers to get this interview
I've got
started off.
a mug full of beer. Cheers.
Cool. Well, first off, it's great to see you again. And how have you been?
I've been busy and cold, but we're gonna make it. It's gonna be okay.
We're gonna survive.
There's a lot of snow here. Yeah, we're gonna make it through. One day we'll see the sun like Adrian.
You got to come down to the equator for that, but
yeah. Yeah. I'll have to try.
Well, to give readers a better sense of the real Krystle Matar, what was your relationship with reading and science fiction and fantasy growing up?
That's a good question. I don't remember a big introduction to fantasy. It was just always kind of, both of my parents read fantasy, so it was just always there. It was just fact of life. I'm trying to remember. Some of the earliest stuff that I remember is Redwall, so I know that's something that we have in common. I think Redwall and the feasting scenes.
So many feasts.
And then, and then, right around 12 or so, I stumbled on David Gemmell novels, which kind of like rocked my world at the time, where it just, I was already writing, but those novels made me really want to, I don't know, take it seriously or whatever that meant. And I remember holding those novels in my hands thinking, man, I want to write like this one day. Like, this is amazing. So I read all of his novels, and then he passed away. And then I stopped reading fantasy because nobody else could quite compare to the gap that he left. And that's when I got into, oh God, yeah, I still get, he died in 2006 and I still get emotional thinking about it. But yeah, just, I wanted to stay in fantasy. Like, I loved the genre, but just nobody else compared at the time. And that's around the time that I bounced off a lot of the classics of the genre. So every time stuff like that comes up, I feel like, oh God, people are going to take my fantasy card away because I have no idea what books these are. But I think David Gemmell's well known enough that it buys me a little bit of street cred. But yeah, so after he passed away, that's when I got into cop novels and mysteries. And Dennis Lehane is a writer out of Boston who writes the most incredible private eye type mysteries and thrillers. And yeah, and then I'm trying to remember how long ago, but I can't remember. I just wanted to come back to fantasy. And it just so happened I was in the bookstore and I picked up a book by a gentleman named Anthony Ryan. And in his acknowledgments, he said David Gemmell is the reason he was writing. So that felt meant to be. So I bought that book, and that was my first I know. And he started self-published too, so that would have been like
Hmm.
his transition book. I think he self-published that book, Blood Song, and then it got picked up by a trad publisher. And yeah,
And
and
then he
then
continued the
Anthony
series.
Ryan, Brian's. Yeah, he finished the trilogy, and he's got another trilogy called Draconis Memoria that's so good. And then I think he went back to Valen recently, but I'm really far behind. But he's got a new trilogy now, starting with anyway. Yeah, so just the time that I was away, fantasy totally changed. It felt like where all of a sudden um, stories were just a little bit more human and a little bit more relatable, at least compared to some of the stuff that I remembered bouncing off of. And it's like, yeah, this is where I want to be. I want to figure out how to get here and do this. And then I stumbled on Twitter and accidentally found myself into the self pub community and launched my debut in 2021.
But
And that is a very
obviously
long and
there was
rambly answer.
obviously there was a point there where it's just like you actively started writing, it's not like, oh, I found Twitter in the self-public community and then boom, Legacy of the Brightwash is just
Yeah.
there. But like at which point did writing come into the
So
picture
it's
for you?
just,
It's like boom, I have
I'm
like
doing
a
great.
650
Okay.
page book.
Yeah. Isn't that how it always goes?
Of
Jeez,
course.
Adrian, like, where's
It
yours?
just pops out
Okay.
your ass. Hey now.
Yeah, that's where I can't. How am I supposed to answer this question now? Okay, so I took an unwilling break from writing each time I had a child, just because having children is so incredibly exhausting that there was
Yeah.
no mental energy left for writing. And then after child number 4, or around the same time that I was, anyway, a while ago, I got really frustrated with not writing, and it felt like I had lost a big part of like myself, because writing carried me through some really hard times in my life, and I was having good times, with a family, but it just felt like a a big section of who I was missing. So I forced myself to. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna write. I started with about a sentence a day, and then built up speed. What year is it now? I want to say that was about 2016, give or take. So it took me a while to draft what was a very bad and very messy fantasy novel that is actually going to end up being a trilogy. So I just kind of like threw a bunch of stuff at the page and none of it made sense.
Mm.
And then when I stepped back to figure out how to make it work, it was like, yeah, there's a lot going on here. I think I can cut this out. That was large. So um, about 2018 is when I cut the first chunk off of it and started trying to figure out how to make it into a book. And that's about the same time that I was making really meaningful friendships on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Totally by accident, I followed Sam Hawk, who wrote City of Lies, and through interacting with her, I met Nick Borelli, um,
Yeah.
and then through interacting with him, I met Clayton and Angela and Luke and Justine Bergman and everybody, DP Wollscroft, fantastic people. So I was getting to know them and getting to understand what self-publishing is capable of these days, and I was trying to wrestle this novel, and um, it took a while because in the middle of that, we moved out to the country and lived in tents for 6 months. Um,
Oh wow.
which was an experience. And then
experience for sure.
Yeah, that was a choice we made. um, I think my youngest was like 3 at the time, maybe 4. I don't know. I don't know what time is. Um, these answers are so terrible. So
Relax,
I,
Krystle,
I was I was I was learning from them kind of what real revising looked like and how to how to think about structure and stuff, things that I hadn't really been exposed to before. Because when I started writing, I kind of assumed that brilliant writers just wrote brilliance, and then editing was picking out a couple of typos here and there, and making sure the continuity worked. Um, and they just got all this incredible depth the first time, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't write like this, so I'll write simpler stories, I guess, because I'm not smart enough to do this. But fortunately, I got to talk to other writers who were like, yeah, no, the first drafts suck, and they don't make any sense, and then you revise it and make it better. So I was
like
learning how to do that.
Polishing a turd. Like 100% it's polishing a turd.
Yeah. It really is, because it that first draft really sucks, but I'm assured that that's part for the course. Either you write a really shitty first draft, or you write a really shitty outline or something, but then you make it good. So through them, I learned how to make it good. And I sent Angela my first beta draft. Yeah, I want to say in November of 2019. And so she had it for a couple of months, and it was kind of like I was asking her, like, I know it's bad, but do you think I could make it good? Like, does this make sense to you? Does it kind of look like a book yet? And the answer was yes. But then 2020 happened, and so I was revising it through everything that happened in 2020, in this very old, very cold, very shitty little house. And it was kind of a refuge from everything, but also it was cathartic because it deals with a lot of the things that we were witnessing in 2020, accidentally. Like when I started writing that book, I thought I was exaggerating, kind of, like I thought I was way out in left field to make a point about how we value convenience as a society. And I just thought I was taking the most extreme version of us as a society, and turning it into a fantasy novel. But now it feels like I am too generous and too optimistic.
That's
So
what
that
book
was
2
fun.
is for.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels weird writing riots and protests and stuff in with the backdrop of everything. So it's been a really weird feeling where I'm writing to what's happening, but then also I'm trying to write fiction. So like it's a weird balance. So I revised it through 2020.
But with that
and
that
what
first
came
book,
out
no, sorry, go ahead.
What came out of writing through that was a story about how love and community can save us from the darkness. And that wasn't there before. And I think it's really important. And I think it's the thing that's resonated the most with people, that, yes, it's really bleak, and yes, it's really dark, but people standing for each other gets them through, hopefully. I haven't finished the series yet.
No, but at least with the
So now
first
I
book,
want to know what you were going to ask.
You have this main character, Tashwe, and everything
Mhm.
that's going on around him. He's sort of like the loci of this story and his personal community and everything. But how did you kind of develop the idea of the Tainted Dominion, like the world and the characters? I think Tashue was one of the first sort of like integral pieces in that, was he not?
Yeah, I've been writing him for 19 years now, and he started as a no, he started as a teenager, but um, some of the first halfway decent novels that I wrote for him, he was a cop. He was a homicide detective. Um, and um, the last couple of novels that I wrote for him, he was chasing a serial killer who killed children. And so that when I pulled him into fantasy, that aspect of wanting to protect the innocent was just a natural part of his. I don't know. It was just part of him. He had to keep that. Um, but then the world. This is going to be another long answer.
Go
um,
for it. It's all
I
good.
started writing the fantasy world um, more traditional in its time settings, so more medieval and Rise of the Farm Boy and all that stuff. And I really liked the world that I was doing, but when I decided I wanted to write about Toshway, I knew for sure that he wasn't going to fit in that for pretty obvious reasons. He's his own guy. Um,
Yeah.
so what I did was I fast forwarded a few hundred years in their history. So all the stuff that I wrote um, is canon as their mythology, and then I built off of that. And the inception for the story was Tesla and their electric cars, where they there's a lot of media about how electric cars are so much better for the environment, but we're still mining those products, and and the electricity still has to come from somewhere, and
Yeah.
we still have to alter the environment to get the electricity and to get what we need for the batteries and to get, and we still, so even though there's technically no emissions as you are driving it, those cars still have a really large footprint. And so I was thinking, like, what would it take? What would it take for us to actually change how we um, commute as a society? And it's just like I can't even imagine what that would look like. Like I don't know what it takes. So it became a conversation about what people are willing to ignore and what people are willing to accept to maintain the convenience and status quo of their lives. And listen, I'm complicit. I have a truck. He's got a big emission. I'm not judging. I'm just, it started as a thought experiment, and it evolved really quickly. So they have to face the fact that their convenience and their industry is driven by how much do I say without spoilers?
Just
It's driven by
brutality.
human suffering. Yeah, yeah. And so if things are going to change, that society is going to have to change a lot. And it just kind of, it's the it's a question. I've asked a question, like how much can people change, um, and what does it take to shock them out of status quo? And that's why it needed to be somebody who was in the system telling the story, because it's all well and good for someone outside the system to say what you're doing is bad. That's easy. It's easy to see from beside the problem, but if you're in the middle of the problem, it's really hard to conceive of how you've contributed and how complicit you are, and it's really hard to figure out where to go. So that's why it had
Yeah,
to be him.
because your convenience is sort of, it's beyond just the fact of this is how I get around. It also comes down to
Hmm.
this is my
Their
job. These are the people
economy.
that I work with, the
Yeah.
economy. This is my employer. This is like sort of this
Yep.
institutionalized framework that I live my life by. And Tasha is just in the middle of the shit. And it takes so much for him
Yep.
to break out of it that the eventual
Yep.
uh clarity of vision is much more um jarring than it otherwise would be. And I thought that came across super well.
That's awesome. That's good to know. Um, that's really good to know. So some people say that they're frustrated with him for being complicit in it, but I don't know, man. Like it's really hard to see what what harm you're perpetrating when your whole society is built on it.
Right. And is it so
So
easy to just say like, oh, there's this small change that I could make in terms of like recycling or
yeah,
doing compost instead of throwing all my stuff in the trash, whatever, or switching to an electric car. But it's so
yeah,
difficult to really like break it down to the nitty gritty and understand like, oh, if I have an electric car, the lithium batteries are coming from lithium mines in Bolivia or where have you.
yeah.
But
You get
for
it.
Ta- for Tasha in particular, it's like he's so ingrained in the system and has been for 19 years. A lot of people who have been in a position for 19 years, like almost 2 decades, your mind would be fucking molded by whatever you're involved
Yeah,
in. And it would take a huge, huge hit to the head, over and over and over again. It's
yeah,
not something that you can just change immediately. It's like, no, you need to
yeah,
be incrementally opened up to the truth of the matter. And then you have to get to the point of accepting it because truth is not always guaranteed to be accepted by people.
yeah, yeah. You nailed it. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. A plus. You get a good. That was a good book report.
Aw, thank you. My fourth grade book report. I'm so happy. Although there's way too much sex in your
Yeah.
book for there to be a fourth grader report.
Ah! Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wouldn't give it to fourth graders.
No, please don't give it to fourth graders. There is penetration in this book.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
It's true though.
I know, and I know what I wrote, and I'm proud of what I wrote, but it's still weird to look people in the eye and chat about it.
Be proud of it, Krystle. Be proud of it. Come on.
Yep, I'm doing good.
But this actually, but this actually leads into what I want to discuss about a few themes from Legacy of the Brightwash that sort of reflect upon its characters and its
Okay.
stories. We've already talked about corrupt institutions, but beyond like convenience, I think it also ties into things like individuality and freedom, and this also ties into your
Yeah.
representation of Indigenous peoples and tainted, talented, magical powers. However, you've incorporated that into your world. Do you want to elaborate on that?
um. Yeah. You're really dropping heavy questions on me, dude. So,
I always do.
so I it wasn't intended that only the indigenous analogy people can use talent, but they're the ones that understand it. And
Mhm.
the society of the Dominion has pushed it away from a natural flow in order to um, commodify um, commodify it. So this is a really hard question to it. I feel like it came as part of the story just because the story became um, an analog of North America, And if I was talking about the cost of industry, it seemed natural that I would also talk about our footprint here, um, as I was exploring what um, what freedom looks like. So, you know, a lot of people are talking about what freedom looks like these days. And some people think that, you know, eating hamburgers without masks on is what freedom looks like. But some other people are saying it goes a little deeper than that. And the
I hope
ability to
so.
govern oneself. Yep. The ability to govern oneself and the ability to know their own history and the ability to direct the society that they live in is freedom that a lot of people can't possibly appreciate because they have it so naturally that they can't even conceive of what it would look like if they lost it. And so when I was writing about an economy that has commodified humanity, it seemed natural that I would include an Indigenous society who truly understood the weight of that. And so that's how it all unfolded, that Toshwe had Indigenous roots that he's lost, that he doesn't know how to find, but that has impacted how he views the laws in the society that he's in, because his mother told him to follow the laws to stay safe, but those laws didn't protect her. And he has to reckon with the weight of that in order to really stand up and change it. And so I reached out to a fantastic sensitivity reader whose help has been just above and beyond what I could have hoped for. And working with them has just been, it felt like a gift that I'm still not convinced I deserve it, but they gave it to me anyway.
You do. Trust me. I've talked to them. I talked to them through you, through your recommendation. And
that's true. Yeah.
They have nothing but shining things to say about you. So
I didn't know that. Yeah, it's been an incredible relationship. Just getting to know them on a personal level, and the way that we've been able to kind of share ourselves by discussing theoretical trauma has been really healing. And yeah, it just, once again, it felt like one of those things that was just meant to be. Like I don't know that I set out writing this book with that intention, that it would take such an important part of Toshwe's identity. It was kind of a last minute decision, because for the longest time I thought, no, I can't, I don't, this isn't my identity. I shouldn't touch it. I should leave it alone. But then kind of at the last minute, I was looking at the Salt and Sage website, which is the agency. And as they tell it, their profile had been posted on the website that week. And so I was the first person to reach out to ask for them as a reader. And so, like, once again, it just felt like it was just meant to be, I guess. Like
Right. The
I
stars
can't explain
align.
it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so they pushed me to make it heavier and make it more central to the story and just really push it. And I'm really grateful that they did that, and that they just so happened to sign on at Salt and Sage the exact week that I was um, wondering if I should do it. So there you go.
Hmm. That's amazing though, because for me, I grew up in Canada, and this
Yeah,
this notion that you present of sort of like, I've phrased it as like the degradation of humanity, which to me is a
yeah,
corruption of nature itself, because us being a part of nature
yeah,
is a corruption
yep,
that goes deeper than just us. And all the Indigenous people in Canada that I grew up with or met, there was always this really fine line between, like you say, with Tashue's mother telling him to follow the laws and you'll be okay, but it's like, how much do those laws really protect you, and to
yeah,
what point are those laws undermining your real identity and your culture and your history? And that's something that suppression is something that I witnessed so often in Canada when I was growing up. And obviously, like, I'm a white dude,
yeah,
and it was not so clear to me back
yeah,
then, just through my position. But I look back on it now, and there's just so many instances where the suppression and the trauma rings true to this day, and the generational
yeah,
effects of it are unbelievable,
yeah.
unimaginable for a lot of
Oh yeah,
people.
yeah. And it's something that we all have to reckon with as colonizers. And whether or not we participated in any of it is a moot point, because people are still suffering. And um, it's hard to know what to do, but fuck, man, we gotta figure something out.
Of
And
course, yeah.
so it felt like an opportunity just to put it on the table to be discussed. Because I don't know how to fix it. I can't claim to have any answers, but the answers will come if we have conversations, I hope.
Yeah.
So
That's the key to it all,
the
I
book
think, is
ended up
conversation.
yeah, yeah. This is a much
And
heavier conversation than I was expecting.
you wrote a heavy book, both physically and
Yeah,
thematically,
I guess
so
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
but something for you that's, um I guess, a lot more, like, it rings a lot closer to home, is the notion of, you brought up earlier how sort of love and trauma can be a motivation for change. But then there are also really heavy themes of parenthood and childhood innocence, but
Yes.
also, from the parental perspective, responsibility, which is
Yeah.
really looming through a lot of the novel. So as a parent yourself, like, how did you approach that aspect of the book?
Um Tasha's been a parent longer than I have. If I think back to like his earliest stories, so not so much when he the first couple of years, but I mean he had kids before I did. So like it was just another one of those things where it was just he's always kind of known who he is, and I'm just along for the ride. um and so as Brightwash evolved, or rather, as I pulled him into fantasy novels, that was another thing that I knew for sure. As I wrote him into fantasy novels, I knew that was going to stay. Not necessarily because it was something that um, I experienced. Just it's just that it was true to him. But Stella being a parent was something that I built because there just aren't a lot of mothers in fantasy. And it felt like, I think for somebody to look at him and see that the choices that he made were wrong, but he was trying his best, I think it would have to be another parent who would be able to see that and understand the weight of that in a way, because parenting has no easy answers.
No.
Yeah, there's no manual and there's no obvious answers. And so I felt like when I was trying to create a love story for him, I kind of knew that it would take another parent to understand him. Um, and that's where Stella came from. Just because he needed somebody to kind of be his true north and to be a goalpost that would help him try to be a better person and try to make better choices, because he was kind of frozen by the trauma that he endured, and he's kind of seized up and he ceased to grow for a long time, and so he was just kind of struggling through and barely surviving, trying to raise his son. But he needed somebody to show him that he was capable of more, um, and it had to be a parent. It it was just obvious.
And it worked. I mean, in terms of how
Yay!
their POVs, their sort of like dual perspectives overlapped with one another. I think it fleshed out because it's like you see the externality and the internality of each character, and the confusion that can sometimes come across of trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and oftentimes fucking up and not really understanding fully what they're
Yeah,
going through. And there's a lot of miscommunication, and to me it was one of the more realistic romances that I've read recently in fiction in general, because there's just there's confusion and there's hesitation and there's the weight of parenting to give it all more complexity, because it's like, when I have the responsibility to this child, from Tashue's perspective, it's his
yeah,
son. To Stella, for Stella, it's Caradwin. I think that's how you say her name, right?
yeah, yeah,
So there's just a weight there of responsibility to this child that a lot of the time supersedes, you know, getting all
yeah.
hot and bothered about some sexy man or woman.
Yeah, yeah, and it's something that we all kind of have to navigate as parents. It's like, who are we now, and how do we fit in this new version of our lives where we're responsible for another person? And that's not to say that we cease to be ourselves, but it does change. It changes. Um, Kind of all of a sudden you're thinking of the future in a different way, and day-to-day safety, and keeping these little hooligans alive in spite of their
Yeah.
best efforts. Um, is yours walking yet?
Parenting. Oh man, he's a tornado. He's running now, and he just hits himself on everything. As
Oh,
much as we try to
yeah.
prevent it,
See,
uh,
yeah, you can't.
yeah,
There's only so much you can do, and it's like the best you can do is just be there, to make them feel better when they've fucked themselves up. And yeah,
parenting is heavy
parenting
shit,
is like,
man.
yeah, it's just this marathon of trying to keep this other human being alive when it seems like they're trying not to be alive. Like,
Exactly.
just anyway. So that changes you, man. Like, that alters who you are and how you see the world.
in very, very deep and profound ways. Yeah, I can attest to all of that because it's seriously just
Yeah,
how many times in a day are you going to threaten your own life? And it's just, you know,
yeah,
I don't want to be like a
way more than
helicopter
you
parent.
imagined.
Yeah. I don't want to be a helicopter parent or anything like that. But at the very least, it's like you say, being present and avoiding catastrophe whenever you can, but
Yeah,
also being there when they hurt themselves because it's an eventuality. They're gonna
yeah,
fucking bump their
yeah.
head or like skin their knee or whatever, and you just have to be there and say it's
Oh,
okay. Yeah, it's
yeah,
like
and kind of teach them how to cope with the catastrophes that they've made.
yeah, just
Yeah.
maintain emotional stability. You know,
Or something like it.
something like it. Because even as adults, it's like we're erratic as fuck. We're just for the most part,
Yeah,
human beings are
it's
just
true.
messy. But for a kid,
Yeah,
it's just
it's
like
true.
let me teach you as much as possible to maintain your emotional composure, or at least to the point where it's like you understand that
Yeah,
it's not forever. It's like this is temporary. You're gonna be
yeah,
okay.
yeah. This too shall
Oh
pass,
man.
and the blood will stop.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh fuck. So how are you taking some of the themes that you've established here in the first book and carrying them in? You've already finished the first draft of the sequel and you're in the revising stage, but how are you carrying
Yeah.
on some of those themes or taking in new themes and perspectives into account?
Um. So the next book, Toshue, has kind of removed himself from the ability to change things for a little while, by doing something stupid at the end of the first book. So we shift. we I don't know how many people have read it yet. We shift to other people for a while they try to clean up his mess, and try to get through whatever comes next. Um, but that sense of community stays. Um, I think I've lost most of my parent POVs um, for a little while. Well, not lost, but I've set them aside for the moment.
Yeah.
Um,
They're fucking gone, man.
Object permanence, right? Like if I take them away, you
Yeah.
won't remember. Um, but so if Brightwash is, follow the law and you'll stay safe, but what if the law is wrong? And what are you willing to do about it? Then Legacy of Brick and Bone is very much, you do whatever it takes for the people you love, and then so the main characters have to figure out what it takes and where their boundaries are and how hard they're willing to push on those boundaries to survive, basically, and to keep the people they love surviving, so that spirit of taking care of the people that you love remains. It shifts to different relationships, um,
Yeah.
a bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah,
And
well, I mean, like it's not a whole new cast. We've got Lorne taking a bigger role, so his everything he's doing is to try to help Jason. And then we also have Ishmael taking a bigger role, and so everything he's doing is to try to help all the people that he cares about. Um, it's so hard to know how much I can say. Um, and Ishmael surprises some people, I think, by having a very large heart and by trying his best to take care of people, but by being, to no one's surprise, very deeply flawed. So
he is a
he's
shithead
got to
indeed.
reckon with. He's a shit. Um, so he's got to reckon with what he's fucked up, and how he's going to fix it. But he's also got to reckon with what Tasha's fucked up and how he's going to fix that too. So I've heaped a lot of shit on his plate.
Well, I'm excited to see how he deals with it. How all of them deal with the sort of aftermath of the end of book one. And we're not going to spoil anything. It's the end of a book. Shit
Yeah,
happens, right?
shit happens.
Shit
Boy,
happens.
does it.
So I want to take a little bit of a turn towards the self-pub author community. Obviously, you've made it to the finals of the SPFBO 7. So how does it feel for you to make it to the finalist round? And then building on that, how important is it for you um, to sort of like maintain a healthy environment within the self-pub community? Because I watched the SPFBO 7 panel for TBR Con, and there was such a good rapport between everyone. It seems like everyone had good spirits and good, uh, you know, good vibes towards each other. So how important is it to sort of like maintain that and build that healthy environment?
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of I don't know if we're all in the same boat, but we're definitely all weathering the same storm. So the togetherness helps. Um, and like, the thing about SPFBO is it brings a lot of attention to the indie community. And so it doesn't ever feel like we're in competition with each other. It feels like we're standing in the spotlight um, together as a unit, hopefully bringing attention and respect to the community um, that unfortunately still has a bit of a stigma about whether or not we're professional or whatever. But and I can say that you know I'm not necessarily a professional person, but my books are polished and professional. So
Professional quality,
um,
yeah.
yeah, professional quality. Let's say that. so um, so in that, being a finalist was really amazing. Um, I don't know what I expected, but I think part of me still convinced myself that it wasn't going to happen because I mean it's 1 out of 30 to get the finalist spot, which is not great odds. And then it entirely depends on who you're up against, and it entirely depends on the judge that you get.
Yeah.
Um, and there were some heavy hitters in my group, and I I have a bit of survivor's guilt because I feel like um, some of those other books were really good too, and I'm sorry, um, but that's just me. But
Don't feel too bad,
certainly, I
Krystle. It's
hope that
okay.
people are
It's just the
checking
nature
out
of competition.
yeah. But I mean, hopefully, people are checking out semifinalists. I think people are, and they should
Mhm.
because there are really really good books out there. Um, and so yeah, making it to the finalists 10 felt like the win, and then now we're just experiencing the long process of winning because all 10 of us have a lot of attention and a little bit extra clout in the industry, which is very crowded. So it helps to have a couple of things that you can say that you've accomplished, so that people recognize what you're up to. Um, and then yeah, the other finalists, getting to know the other finalists is really great, and just generally getting to know the self published industry has been amazing. It totally changed my outlook on the ability to make this a career. And I'm looking forward to continuing in this industry for a while, thanks to the amazing people that I've met.
Yeah. Well, on that note, what's your take on like the current state of self-published fantasy or sci-fi for that matter? And do you have do you have hopes for its future, like more things that you'd like to see that you think it's missing, or not even just like something that's missing, but the recognition that the self-published community deserves?
Yeah, I would. The only thing that I would wish for is just, yeah, recognition, because I'm not sure that consumers talk about indie spaces quite the same way in other arts as they do in writing, and I'm not sure where that comes from, because it's like if you talk about indie music, for example, no one ever really says that indie musicians aren't professional. Um,
Exactly.
so, so I'm not really sure where that comes from. Um, but it's definitely shifting, where we are proving by working our asses off that the stories that we tell are maybe a little bit outside of the box, but they're certainly, you know, we're working really hard to make professional quality products that can really resonate with people. Yeah, so I'm delighted to be part of the crowd shifting and gaining popularity and gaining respect, and it feels like a really cool space to be in, where we get to experiment and try things out. Um, and if ideas don't work, we just keep rolling, and we can shift and pivot really fast, and we can um, try some really wild things, and just kind of, be the crazy art kids. Um, so I'm totally off the rails here. So many
No, it's all good.
distractions in this house. Um, but yeah, I think I'm really excited to be part of it, and it does definitely feel like we have. I don't want to say more freedom, because it does feel like mainstream at SFF is doing some pretty cool things too in tandem with us, and it just seems like the two crowds are kind of feeding off each other a little bit in a really cool way, where it's
Mhm.
like indie tries something and it gets some attention, so trad pub goes for it, and then trad pub is off into some new ideas, and the indie crowd sees it and goes, yeah, that's a good idea. And so it doesn't necessarily ever feel like we're totally in competition. It feels like we are bleeding together, and there's more and more writers that are doing both, where they have their contracts with the big house, but they're also self-publishing their own stuff. So it feels like more a more connected industry than I think I
Mhm.
was aware of before I got into it. um, and yeah, it's exciting to see more respect.
No, I think you hit it perfectly because obviously in the indie community there's more flexibility for experimentation,
Yeah,
and the speed at which things go. Obviously the traditional publishing industry is much slower. There's the
yeah,
time it takes to edit. There's also the time it takes to print the books and get it through all these different passes
yeah,
before it hits the stores. Obviously, they have to take into account retailers and transportation and all this stuff. But in the
yeah,
indie community, there's like a much more fast paced nature to it. But I like what you said, that they feed off of each other, because I think the indie community has the opportunity to uh, create new niches, or at the very least give readers the opportunity to discover something that they really like, and then that expectation is established, and hopefully the traditional publishers
yeah.
pick up on that and start to seek out more diversity of ideas and representation.
Yeah, the indie community, because we were able to move a little bit faster, we can test markets, and see what hits. And and it definitely does feel like the big publishers are watching and seeing what's working. Um, and then and yeah, it's definitely not one or the other. It definitely both are doing some really cool things.
Mhm. Kind of like in tandem, but also separate at the same time. So it's like
Yeah,
eventually there's often a confluence of similar thinking, and that's when the industry really pushes forward more heavily as a whole towards bigger and better things.
yeah, yeah. It's really cool to be a part of. Yeah, I'm in it for the long haul, I think.
But it's also opened my eyes to the possibilities. You mentioned hybrid authors, and I think there's so much more opportunity out there. It's like you don't need to fucking pigeonhole yourself and think
Yeah,
that, oh, I'm gonna go into traditional and self-publishing is my fallback or something like that. It's like self-publishing can stand on its own as a viable path for an author,
yeah,
but you can also mix it up and do hybrid. You can release a series traditionally, but you can also release novellas self-published. You can do so many more things and mix it up. But I think all of it boils down to how hard are you willing to work to create quality
yes,
content, because people will go for the quality. If it's shit, that gets buried because it's shit.
yeah,
So of course.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I never queried Brightwash. I wrote a query letter, but by the time I was, I wanted to work with a sensitivity reader before I queried, and then the agency where I found the sensitivity reader also had editors, and so by the time I started getting that stuff going, it just felt like, well, why don't I just finish the process myself? Why put it in the
Yeah,
hands of somebody else and wait and see? And so yeah, for me, I never queried Brightwash because I was too impatient to finish it. I just wanted it. I just if I was gonna make this work, I didn't want to wait for somebody else to take a chance on me. I wanted it to be like, okay, I'm gonna do it, and if I fail, then I'm done. It's fine. I tried my best. But if I
it's
succeed,
your
it's because I
failure and
made
you
it
can own it.
happen. And yeah, exactly. But I didn't want to sit in somebody's inbox for a little while waiting to see how if a market trend was going to be in my favor. Um, and I mean, no disrespect to people who go that way. Like, there are some really amazing writers doing really amazing stories, and um, and they're great. I love them. They're my friends, and I. But I think the best thing I ever saw was when I was trying to decide. Dirk Ashton was on a panel with a couple of other guys talking about the differences between self pub and trad, and Dirk said
Mhm.
that it's like the difference between being an employee and an entrepreneur, and both of them are hard, and both of them have qualities, but you just have to pick which one fits your personality best. and
100%.
and when he said that, it was like, yeah, light bulb. Okay, okay, I get it. And then I was already hustling. I was thinking about who I'd want for my cover, and I was thinking about, what kind of editing I was going to do, and it was like, oh, I see. Yes, okay, I am an entrepreneur. Got it. So I think I
You
made the
have way too
decision
much
before I knew that I'd made the decision.
yeah, I think for you it's like your impatience would just make it too difficult to be
Yep.
somebody under somebody else's belt. It's like you need to be self-directed
Yeah.
and self-employed, because you would get frustrated. I'm like this a lot of the time too. It's like I've been my own boss for a long
Yeah.
time, and I get frustrated when other people take too long to do something or do it in such a way where it's just like that's
Yeah.
not what I envisioned at all, you
Yeah.
know?
No, just forget it. Let me do it myself.
Exactly. Just fuck off.
Yeah.
Let me do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that was the statement that made it really clear to me that it's like it's
Mhm.
not one or the other. Like, they're both of quality. It's just what do you want to be? Like, how many different hats are you capable of wearing,
Yeah.
and how much control do you want? And if you're an entrepreneur, then hopefully you can grind and you can make it work.
Yeah, but I think the grind applies regardless. It's like whether you go traditional or
Yeah,
self-published, the grind exists, but it just comes in different forms, you know? Just depends on
yeah,
what you're
yes,
willing to do
certainly.
yourself and what you want to put in other people's hands.
Certainly, self or traditionally published authors are expected to be on social media, um, kind of having a presence. So it's like I think there's less. There's less of a difference than people realize, between one identity or the other, because trad pub authors got to market. They've got to be there. They've got to shout about their books. They've got to interact with people. It's just kind of like the backroom stuff that we're in control of, but the the social presence is very similar between the two.
Yeah. That's something I've noticed for sure. But winding down, I want to spend a moment talking about our two of our shared cultural and literary idols, our dear Anthony
Yes.
Bourdain, may he rest in peace, and Michael Pollan. So what can you
You're gonna make me emotional
what can you
again.
tell me what can you tell me about each of them, and why do you love the work that they put out?
I think so I came to Anthony Bourdain first. Um and I think the first thing that I saw of him was the CNN show that he was doing. Um Parts Unknown.
Yeah.
That's what it's called, right? Yeah, okay. Um
Yeah.
and he really did something amazing with that show where he pushed it beyond your traditional traveling show and just kind of forced people to look and to bear witness, um, to things that we probably wouldn't have been exposed to a lot, um, in other ways. Because sometimes it's hard to conceptualize what people are going through when all you've got is headlines and stuff. But the way he formatted that show was just so incredibly human, where he was there on the premise that he was going to go eat food with local people, and then through that you could just see how incredibly human, um life is. And it didn't matter if he couldn't communicate with the people and he needed to use translators. You could still see the connection, and it's just that reminder that we're all we all boil down to the same basic needs of safety and sustenance, and the same basic driving principles of taking care of the people we love. um, but the world throws a whole lot of shit at people, um, and different kinds of shit depending on where you are.
It's
And
very true. Yeah.
that show that show really plugged me into, being aware, in a way that I wasn't before. And I don't remember what years it aired, but like I think I was pretty young when I started watching it. Certainly, at least in my mid 20s, and I
Parts
was not
Unknown was more uh that was like the late sort of like started in the 2010s, and then it ended
right.
up until it went up until he committed suicide. So I
So
think it went for
yeah,
like a good 7 or no, sorry, like 12 seasons. Yeah. So it was quite a long show.
yeah. So 10 years ago, that tracks. Then 10 years ago, either my third child was not around yet or very young. Yeah, so it just plugged me in a way that I hadn't been before. Um, and then of course, you follow his career to backwards to all the other things that he's done. And he was so he's kind of the perfect example of that adage of um kind but not nice. um
Yeah.
he was you have people that are nice but not kind, and then you have people that are kind but not nice. And um he, he did not give a lot of fucks until he did give a lot of fucks. And he just he just the community that he built was just really amazing to witness. And his writing is so I can't even find words for it. He's so irreverent, and nothing is
Raw.
sacred.
To
And
me it's just
in
yeah.
yeah, and in that lack, I don't want to say lack of respect, but in that imperfection that he was willing to address, things had more meaning somehow. And it just an incredible voice of our generation. um so that's my long rambling answer of Anthony Bourdain. And so I read Kitchen Confidential recently. And the story that he tells of growing up and visiting France and being like a total shit as a child was just so
Yeah.
funny.
Like a little shithead eating
And
oysters. Oh, beautiful.
yeah, and he was talking about how him and his brother, like his parents were touring France, and they were mega foodies, and all his him and his brother wanted was hamburgers and French fries and Coca-Cola. And his parents were devastated. And then the story where they left the children behind in the car to go eat at a restaurant that was going to be really
Yeah.
special. and and he was like, it just so it was so, I don't know, it was just exactly what I needed at the time. Just this human experience of food and vulnerability and trying to figure yourself out, and probably kind of failing, but you know that's okay. We loved him. So
Yeah. I mean,
uh,
failure is just a part of the game, you know?
it's true. We get really focused as a culture on winning and on success, but you know for every win there's losses, and I think the losses shape us a lot more than the wins do, because
For sure.
a win is so temporary. And but the way we adjust when we lose seems to be more permanent. So anyway, that's my Anthony Bourdain
What
rambling.
about Michael Pollan?
So the first thing that I saw from Michael Pollan was his Netflix documentary called Cooked. And it was that, I think it was like four episodes or 5 episodes, just kind of about the history of food, which makes it sound really dry, but I promise it isn't. um, and the very human experience of what food does to us as a culture. So we focused on yeast, which is bread and beer, and he focused on um,
Fire, I think, is one of them as
I
well.
don't remember. Yeah, fire was one of the episodes, and it was just again, it was just so like the premise sounds really dry, but it was so incredibly human, and inspiring, and connecting again, where that once again it's an expression of how whatever language we all speak, we're all just trying our best to provide for the people we love. So it was that same kind of connection. So I followed him through his food writing. So the Omnivore's Dilemma, and the Botany of Desire, which isn't as sexy as it sounds. What's that one? I'm trying to see what
It's
else I
sexy if you're
have.
a
But yeah,
plant.
so I followed him through his. Yeah, exactly. um, and he had quite a few stuff on Netflix for a while, and then he shifted his focus a little bit,
To psychedelics.
where it's still things. Yes, mushrooms, and peyote, and mescaline, and opium, and that that's another one that was just it was not something I was super plugged into. Now it's been a while and all that, but like I don't think I've ever really thought about the history of all of that stuff. Um, and so it was really interesting to read This Is Your Mind on Plants, specifically with his experimentation with poppy opium poppies, um and then what was the middle one? Oh, caffeine. And then
Caffeine and then mescaline.
yeah, and he approaches it so academically, but also like the stuff is some Schedule 1 narcotics. So like it was just
Yeah.
such a I'd already kind of been kind of hippie-ish in my stance on plants in general, where you know what makes one thing illegal and another thing um not, when we're talking about plants. And just because it's natural doesn't mean it's not harmful. Like ricin
Exactly.
is natural and it
Mhm.
kills you, but at the same time some of it feels like government overreach, especially when you read the histories of the North American drug wars.
The war
um
Yeah, the war on drugs, or like the opium wars in China.
yeah, 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 that I read a um oh, I'm not going to be able to remember what it's called now, but I read a good series that you would probably like, specifically about the opium wars, and I can't remember it, so I'll text it to you later, and you can put it in
Okay.
the show notes or something. I don't know.
Perfect.
um but yeah, it's just like it's just really interesting. And it still again goes back to that same core of people just trying their best. Now when we talk about drugs instead of food, although the line gets pretty blurry, um, we're talking about people trying their best to cope, and that's something we all have to figure out. So all of that kind of intertwines into what fascinates me the most about people is just how connected we all are, how similar we all are, but the lines that we draw on what we're willing to accept and what we are not willing to accept can be really arbitrary sometimes, and I like exploring that. And so that's how Michael Pollan, the journalist, and Anthony Bourdain ended up in a Venn diagram, because they're both kind of talking
Yeah.
about the same thing. Um,
they're both I
So
think
yeah,
you brought up the humanizing aspect of Anthony Bourdain, and I think Michael
yeah,
Pollan does the same thing. It's like they humanize things that um we might not necessarily understand or be aware of, whether it's food or
yeah,
culture or drugs or history, but all of these things, it's like they intersect. But I like it's how like Anthony always came at it from a an angle of authenticity and just digging
yeah,
into the nooks and crannies of food through the lens of culture and history, whereas Michael Pollan digs into the nooks and crannies of things like food or drugs or whatever from an academic perspective. But then he also uses his deep knowledge to
yep,
reveal the human, the just like the basic human nature of something like caffeine or mescaline, or in the case of cooked, like our history with food. It's beautiful.
yeah, yeah. It's his the way he tears down what you go into those books thinking you're going to have an opinion, and the way he delivers a story and a set of facts just totally changes what you thought you were going to experience. Um, and so like he's met this blend of academia and storytelling in a way that just I haven't seen in any other nonfiction writer ever. And I've
Are not as
I've
good.
read a lot of research books. Yeah, not like he does. Like I don't know what it is about him specifically, but he's just an incredible storyteller, and he's got the balls to come to you with a story about opium, and by the end
Yeah.
of it you're like, yeah, you made the right choice. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and
The
yeah,
government's stupid.
I just yeah, and yeah, and it that's the kind of storytelling that I keep aspiring to, where it challenges comfort, but not in a way that's combative. He's not picking a fight with you. He's guiding you
He's
through.
conveying information.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He's just telling you what he's learned in a way that is so convincing, um, and it really challenges the way you think. Like I said, without it feeling combative, it just feels like a conversation between you and him and history, and he's brilliant.
Mhm.
So
For anyone listening, just watching, please go check out Michael Pollan or Anthony Bourdain's work. It'll
yeah,
it'll it'll make crystals and myself, our outlooks and just approaches to things much
it'll
more
make everything
clarifying.
make sense, I think. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it'll bring a lot of clarity. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
I
Well,
didn't know
closing
Jonathan
out.
DeVere also read Michael Pollan.
Yeah, yeah, that was awesome. And
I
I
didn't.
just like very
Yeah,
spontaneously came up with the idea of calling us the pollinators as his fan club.
yeah,
So I hope that's a real thing.
I'm good. Yeah, we should put it in our Instagram bios if there's enough room.
Oh, fuck yeah. The Pollinator
Yeah,
Michael Pollan fan club. I'm so down for that.
yeah,
Cool. Well,
let's do it.
closing out, what are you currently reading, watching, or listening to that you want to share with viewers and listeners? That's not Michael Pollan or Anthony Bourdain, because we've swooned over them enough.
um, yeah, honestly, I can't say that I'm watching anything. I haven't watched anything in a while. Lately, I've been reading. I'm reading J.E. Hannaford's The Skin. So she's indie. I have it. I have it back here. This beautiful book.
Nice.
And she's written about selkies. And kind of an old feel of magic. And I'm told that it it really defies your expectations, which obviously is something that I really like. So I'm quite looking forward to reading more of that, and I think more people should read it. Um, I know Benjamin from Literature and Lo-Fi had an interview with her recently, so that was a lot of fun. Um,
As part of his February she wrote, I think.
yeah, February she wrote. Yep. Yeah, he reviewed um, the skin, and he interviewed her for February she wrote, and she seems like a lot of fun, and her writing is just beautiful, and it's kind of an expression of what indie can do, where um, she kind of it's familiar, and yet it's so different, and it's really good. She's really great. Um,
Nice.
And then I've had the pleasure of beta reading Angela Bourd's next novel called Through Dreams So Dark. It's a portal fantasy with like Cold War spy vibes, and it's another one that just defies categorization. But Angela is another really stunning writer, where again, you can see where she nods to her roots as a fantasy reader. Um, some of the staples of the genre,
Robin
but then
Hobb,
she's taking
for
it.
sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but she's taking it to the new era of what indie can do, and she's amazing. And maybe I'm biased because she's my, I don't know, I don't even know how to classify her, but like she's amazing. Her writing is amazing. So I'm really looking forward to when that publishes it, so that I can make people buy it, throw copies at people.
Mm-hmm. And shout out to Angela, she's fucking awesome. So
Yeah, she is
is that
awesome.
book related? Is that book related to Fortune's Fool at all, or is this a standalone?
No, so it's another series. So doing one
Okay,
giant series isn't hard enough. Angela is going to do two giant series concurrently. So
it's a beast.
I'm reading um yeah, this one's big. I'm reading that one, and while I'm reading it, she's working on Fortune's Fool's sequel. So because she doesn't have enough to do in the day, I guess. she's she's going to publish two giant series at the same time, but they're amazing. It's so everyone should go buy Fortune's Fool and wait for everything that's coming next.
And go check out episode 7, because both Krystle and Angela were on with Andrea Stewart talking about food and fantasy. It's just like
Food.
salivating so much. And yeah, if you
Yeah,
can't tell already, after talking about
was,
Michael Pollan and Anthony Bourdain, we love
yeah,
food.
yeah, that we do.
Oh man, cool. Well, Krystle, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. As always, an absolute
Thank
pleasure
you.
to see you. If you can tell viewers
Thank
and
you
listeners
very
where they can
much for
find you on
having
social
me.
media. Pleasure.
So mostly I'm on Twitter. It's just at Krystle Matar. That's where I'm most accessible. Um, and then I'm also on Instagram, which is again at Krystle Matar, which I don't update as regularly. And then my website is krystlematar.com, which I update even less. um, yeah,
And go
that's
pick up
everything.
Legacy of the Brightwash.
Yes. Well, I've got mine too. I hope I don't drop anything. There we go.
It's chunky.
You
Chunky
also.
boy.
He's so hefty.
So hefty.
I'm trying to make the second one.
You can do bicep
The second
curls with your
one's a bit
books.
longer. Yeah, yeah. I really feel bad for people trying to read physical copies. Like I feel like I owe them restitution or something for any muscle
Carpal tunnel
strains.
syndrome amongst Krystle's reader.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. There's going to be a
All
class
right,
action.
Krystle. But thank you so much. Honestly, I love hanging out with you as always. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.